Hello, thank you for watching today's video. I am Kate Payne, an educational psychologist at Cognos. This is a trauma and executive function series supporting children and young people. In today's episode of the executive function series, we're going to be looking at task initiation and time management. Overall, there are 11 executive functions that we're going to refer to within the series. And whilst today we are focusing on these two, there are 9 other different elements that we'll be discussing in our other videos. So please do look out for them if you are interested in finding out more information. What are task initiation and time management? When is it important in your life to demonstrate these two skills? When does it become a problem? And in what ways do we expect our children to have these skills? Task initiation is the capacity to be able to begin projects in a timely fashion. It's for children to be able to start a task on their own. All children may find this difficult sometimes, but there may be some children who always seem to not know where to start and need many prompts and scaffolds to make a start on the task or the instruction. Time management is to be able to estimate how much time you have and then use this within the time limits and deadlines. For example, you might spend a long time getting ready in the morning, which then makes them late for school, or always running out of time in their schoolwork. For some young people with executive function difficulties, they might have difficulty in one or both of these areas. If you are finding that the young person you have in mind always does seem to run late for things, or never quite finishes the tasks, or always takes a long time to do things, or not wanting to start something, then they might have difficulty with their task initiation and or their time management. If this is the case, then it might be helpful to have a talk with the young person to talk through task initiation and time management, to explain what it is, to provide them with the education around how they might have the strength or difficulty in this area. And next, we're going to be thinking about some different activities and examples to be able to facilitate this discussion. First of all, you might play a game called the Detective Starter. And this is where one person is a detective, and so they're going to close their eyes, and then another person in the group is going to be the starter. So they're going to start giving instructions to the rest of the group for everyone to follow. And then it's up to the detective to try and work out who is the starter. And this opens up a discussion about the person that needs to initiate the instructions for the rest of the group to follow. You might have some question times where you're in a group trying to work out who has different skills in starting different tasks. It might be who brushes their teeth without being reminded, who gets up first in the morning, who charges their devices before they run out, who starts their homework as soon as they get home, or who leaves it to the last minute. This is a game really of asking questions, making it fun and engaging, but most importantly, opening up the discussion to find out how some people might find it easier to start tasks compared to other people. You can then come up with your own examples where you have found it easier or more difficult to start different tasks. So it could be starting homework straight away, or perhaps times when you needed to create a list of things and start with the first thing on the list. So coming up together with, as a family, different types of examples of when you might need to initiate a task or where it's been difficult to do so. Next, we're going to be talking about how we might describe time management to a young person. There's a fun game called A Minute's Up, and that's where you make sure all clocks and watches on phones are all hidden, and then as a family you can try and work out when a minute is up and see who gets closest to the minute. You can all close your eyes, you can stand up or sit down, and then when the minute is up you can then talk about how do we know? What did it feel like? How do we realise that time without actually having knowledge of when the minute was up? Another thing you can do is trying to work out with a young person how many things they can do in a minute. How many star jumps can they do? How many times can they write their name? Or how many times can they walk around the living room? It's short activities for them to estimate first how many they'll do and then test it out and have a go at doing it to see if they can meet what they thought they'd be able to achieve. And this is leading up to that discussion around time management, what it feels like to be able to complete a task in a specified time. And then these activities can obviously be adapted for the age of the child too. When we're thinking about what examples we might be able to come up with, we could be thinking about how we might spend too long in one question in an exam, especially for students who are thinking about the importance of having equal weighting or a good spread of time across the questions to get the best marks. Again, we might be thinking about the importance of having enough time to proofread, especially perhaps in an exam. So you're not writing and then not having the time at the end to proofread. Or it could be about making sure we finish the task when it's needed. Does the young person feel sometimes in class they haven't finished what they're doing before the teacher's moved on? Or perhaps this might be indicating that they have some difficulty with their time management. In these discussions with young people about task initiation, but also time management, hopefully they'll start to have an understanding of the different skills within these areas and potentially how they might find it difficult to do one or both of these. You could then introduce the idea that actually there are strategies that we can use to support our capacity to be able to initiate tasks and work within time limits. It's highlighting that we all have strengths, we all have difficulties, and we all have ways in which to cope and develop our skills in the areas that we all have difficulty with. It's the importance of making the young person aware of what the strategies are and why they're doing it. It's not being done to them, but actually they're really involved in the process. They understand the purpose and how it's going to support them. Even with children who are perhaps in Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2, it's still really important to have these discussions and help them to understand and be actively involved in using these strategies so that they can, in the future, have more independence in knowing what strategies work for them in the areas that they have some difficulty with. The level of scaffold might be high initially, but that can be reduced as they grow older and have more independence. First of all, we're going to think about some example strategies to support a young person that might have difficulty with task initiation. So helping them to think about, what's going to be useful for them. And if they can come up with their own, that's fantastic. They'll be able to use these strategies to be empowered. But if that's not the case, you might be able to give some other examples for them. An example might be where they write the first sentence or answer the first question in the first minute, or perhaps adjusting the task for 5 minutes and see how you go on. And actually for some children, once they've started the task, it's much easier to carry on, but the thought of doing the whole thing can feel really overwhelming. So if we reduce the expectations, so you've only got to do one thing in 1 minute, off you go, that could actually be really reassuring to break that down. Or saying to them, actually, when you're in class, have a look at your peers, find out what they're doing, follow them so you can start the task. And if they can do that, they might be able to just carry on after that once they're in that kind of motion. There's also the notion of actually making a good enough start. For some children, they might worry about making a mistake or getting it wrong or not having a good enough answer. And these are things that can become a barrier for them starting their task. And this often can happen in writing tasks in particular. So it's just saying to them, actually, it's good enough. Just have a go. We can go back and change it if we need to later. But actually just starting and being good enough can sometimes help them to feel like, actually, I'm just going to have a go. Next, we're going to think about some different strategies to support time management. One example could be the use of a timer. At home in the mornings, if your child is always running late or taking ages to do their morning routine, you can perhaps say, okay, here's a timer for eating breakfast. Here's a timer for getting your uniform on. Setting timers throughout the morning for them to try and keep to. If they're younger, you might use a visual sound timer so they can understand how the time is going. And for the older ones, you might use a stopwatch or a phone to be able to do this. Timers are often used quite frequently in school as well. If a timer does work for them, this is something that teachers can use in the classroom as well. Reminders can also be helpful. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Giving them prompts about how much time is left before they finish the task. Or perhaps working in 5-minute bursts. So if you've got a piece of homework to do, which is half an hour long, they might find it really difficult to complete that work within that time frame. But perhaps breaking that down into 5-minute chunks. So actually within 5 minutes, you have to complete 2 questions. And the next 5 minutes, complete 2 questions. And carry on doing that, breaking it down into smaller chunks so they can manage their time much more effectively. This is really helpful when we're thinking about a longer task, perhaps for a piece of coursework for a young person to do. Again, the idea of having a couple of months to complete a huge assignment can feel really overwhelming, but breaking that into smaller chunks, perhaps what you need to achieve per week, can be much more manageable to be able to complete. As with the other videos, when you're having these discussions, it's going to be helpful to sit down with them and think about task initiation and time management. And you can use the diagram to aid that discussion if that's going to work for you, with you. But actually, having a really visual tool that the young person can complete and keep hold of afterwards can be really helpful. Don't have to use it if you don't want to, but actually, the most important thing is that the young person develops a shared understanding of these concepts and comes away with all tangible things that they can do and test out and try. If you were going to use this visual tool, you come up with a definition together, for example, for task initiation. Encourage them to write down in their own words is really important. What does it mean to you? Drawing a picture, to represent how that means for them, and then coming up with some real life relevant examples that the young person has experienced themselves, so they're really tangible and relevant. And then coming up with 1 or 2 strategies that you're going to work together as a family to be able to redevelop that skill. And then you can come back to this at a later date to review how it's going. And these are really helpful to hold on to so that the young person has a really visual reminder of that discussion. And it can be taken into school as well for them to see. You can make this as creative, as fun as you want, making it bright colours and lovely things the young person can really be proud of and use. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll be aware of this idea of having a toolbox of strategies. This is the idea that all these videos and discussions are working towards the young person having their own toolbox. They're aware of their strengths, and they're aware of 1 or 2 things they might find difficult, and they know which strategies really help for them. And it's going to be fantastic for the young person to be able to, by the end of these experiences and discussions, they know, I find this really difficult to start a task. I find it helpful when I write down a checklist of things to do and I do the first one in the first minute. And if I can do that, that really helps me to be able to just get going and start. If a young person can reach that point, that is really, really helpful for them and is going to help them in their future when they're in secondary school or in post-16 settings or into adult life as well. And that's what we're really working towards with all of these, developing their independence for themselves. Thank you for watching the episode today within our executive function and trauma series. If you are interested, there are many other videos available on the 9 other areas of executive functions. Thank you for watching.